necessary for you to continue to push for a statement directing people to leave all the way through that period of time until it was ultimately issued after?
I felt it was my obligation to continue to push for that, and others felt it was their obligation as well.
Would it have been possible at any moment for the president to walk down to the podium in the briefing room and talk to the nation at any time between when you first gave him that advice at 2 o'clock and 4:17 when the video statement went out? Would that have been possible?
Would it have been possible?
Yes.
Well, yes, it would have been possible.
I saw absolutely zero basis for the allegations, but they were made in such a sensational way that they obviously were influencing a lot of people, members of the public, that there was this systemic corruption in the system and that their votes didn't count and that these machines controlled by somebody else were actually determining it, which was complete nonsense. And it was being laid out there, and I told them that it was crazy stuff, and they were wasting their time on that. And it was doing a grave disservice to the country.
Attorney General Barr made a public announcement on December 1st, less than a month, that he had seen no suspended fraud sufficient. Fair to say that by December 1st, we had reached the same conclusion?
It's fair to say that I agree with Attorney General Barr's conclusion on December 1st. Yes, I did, and I supported that conclusion. I don't know what her understanding of whether she had been appointed, what she had been appointed to. Okay, in my view, she hadn't been appointed to anything.
I want to start by asking if you agree, Mr. Cipollone, with the conclusions of Matt Morgan and Bill Barr, of all of the individuals who evaluated those claims, that there is no evidence of election fraud sufficient to undermine the outcome in a particular state.
Yes, I agree with that.
And Mr. Cipollone also specifically testified that he believed that Donald Trump should have conceded the election.
Did you believe that Mr. Cipollone, that the president should concede once you made a determination based on the investigations that you credited DOJ did, and the campaign did? Did you, in your mind, form the belief that the president should concede the election loss at a certain point after the election?
Well, again, I was the White House counsel. Some of those decisions are political, so to the extent that, but if your question is, did I believe he should concede the election at a point in time? Yes, I did. I believe Leader McConnell went onto the floor of the Senate, I believe in mid-December, and basically said, the process is done. That would be in line with my thinking on these things.
Mr. Cipollone also testified that the president's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, said he shared this view.
As early as that November 23rd meeting, we understand that there was discussion about the president possibly conceding the election. And specifically, we understand that Mark Meadows assured both you and Attorney General Barr that the president would eventually agree to a graceful exit. Do you remember Mr. Meadows making any such representation?
Are you saying as part of that meeting or separately? Again, without getting into that meeting, I would say that is a statement and a sentiment that I heard from Mark Meadows.
I see. And again, do you know if it was on November 23rd or some point?
Again, it was probably, around that time, and it was probably subsequent to that time. It wasn't a one-time statement.
By that time, the president or his associates had lost 60 out of 61 cases that they had brought to challenge different aspects of the election in a number of states. They lost 60 out of 61 of those cases. So by the time we get to January 3rd, that's been clear. I assume, Pat, that you would agree the president is obligated to abide by the rulings of the courts.
Of course.
And I assume you also would...
Everybody is obligated to abide by the rules of the courts.
And I assume you also would agree the president has a particular obligation to take care that the laws be faithfully executed.
That is one of the president's obligations, correct?
I saw absolutely zero basis for the allegations, but they were made in such a sensational way that they obviously were influencing a lot of people, members of the public, that there was this systemic corruption in the system and that their votes didn't count and that these machines controlled by somebody else were actually determining it, which was complete nonsense. And it was being laid out there, and I told them that it was crazy stuff, and they were wasting their time on that. And it was doing a grave disservice to the country.
Attorney General Barr made a public announcement on December 1st, less than a month, that he had seen no suspended fraud, sufficient. Fair to say that by December 1st, you had reached the scene.
It's fair to say that I agree with Attorney General Barr, that Attorney General Barr's conclusion on December 1st, yes, I did, and I supported that conclusion.
My recollection is the president said something like, well, we could get to the bottom, some people say we could get to the bottom of this if the department sees the machines. It was a typical way of raising a point. And I said, absolutely not. There's no probable cause, and I'm not going to seize any machines. And that was that.
Yeah.
But this wasn't the end of the matter. On the evening of December 18th, 2020, Sidney Powell, General Michael Flynn, and others entered the White House for an unplanned meeting with the president, the meeting that would last multiple hours and become hot-blooded and contentious. The executive order behind me on the screen was drafted on December the 16th, just 2 days after the Electoral College vote, by several of the president's outside advisors over a luncheon at the Trump International Hotel. As you can see here, this proposed order directs the Secretary of Defense to seize voting machines, quote, effective immediately, but it goes even further than that. Under the order, President Trump would appoint a special counsel with the power to seize machines and then charge people with crimes with all resources necessary to carry out her duties. The specific plan was to name Sidney Powell as special counsel.
I don't think Sidney Powell would say that I thought it was a good idea to appoint her special counsel. I was vehemently opposed. I didn't think she should be appointed to anything. There was a real question in my mind and a real concern, particularly after the Attorney General had reached a conclusion that there wasn't sufficient election fraud to change the outcome of the election. When other people kept suggesting that there was, the answer is, what is it? And at some point, you have to put up or shut up. That was my view.
Why was this, on a broader scale, a bad idea for the country?
To have the federal government seize voting machines, it's a terrible idea for the country. That's not how we do things in the United States. There's no legal authority to do that. And there is a way to contest elections, that happens all the time. But the idea that the federal government could come in and seize election machines, I don't understand why we even have to tell you why that's a bad idea. It's a terrible idea. With respect to the whole election fraud issue, to me, it's sort of, if you're going to make those kind of claims, and people were open to them early on because people were making all sorts of claims, and the real question is, show the evidence, okay?
At some point, did one of them make a comment that they didn't have evidence, but they had a lot of theories?
That was Mr. Giuliani.
During this period, I perceived his goal with all of this to keep Trump in office. He had very seriously and deeply considered the allegations of voter fraud. But when he began acknowledging that maybe there wasn't enough voter fraud to overturn the election, I witnessed him start to explore potential constitutional loopholes more extensively, which I then connected with John Eastman's theories.
The meeting would last over 6 hours, beginning here in the Oval Office. moving around the West Wing, and many hours later, ending up in the president's private residence. The Select Committee has spoken with 6 of the participants, as well as staffers who could hear the screaming from outside the Oval Office. What took place next is best told in their own words, as you will see from this video.
Did you believe that it was going to work, that you were going to be able to get to see the president without an appointment?
I had no idea.
In fact, you did get to see the president without an appointment.
We did.
How much time did you have alone with the president? And I say alone, you had other people with you, but
right
from his aides before the crowd came running?
Probably no more than 10 or 15 minutes.
Was in that...
I bet Pat Cipollone set a new land speed record.
I got a call either from Molly that I need to get to the Oval Office.
So that was the first point that I had recognized, okay, there was nobody in there from the White House. Mark's gone. What's going on right now?
I opened the door and I walked in. I saw General Flynn. I saw Sidney Powell sitting there. I was not happy to see the people in the Oval Office.
Explain why.
Well, again, I don't think they were providing. Well, first of all, the overstock person, I've never knew who this guy was. Actually, the first thing I did, I walked in, I looked at him, and I said, "Who are you?" And he told me. I don't think any of these people were providing the president with good advice. And so I didn't understand how they had gotten in.
In the short period of time that you had with the president, did he seem receptive to the presentation that you were making?
He was very interested in hearing particularly about the CISA finding and the terms of 13848 that apparently nobody else had bothered to inform him of.
I was asking, like, you claiming the Democrats were working with Yugoslavs, Venezuelans, and whomever else. And at one point, General Flynn took out a diagram that supposedly showed IP addresses all over the world, and who was communicating with whom via the machines, and some comment about like Nest thermostats being hooked up to the internet.
So it's been reported that during this meeting, Ms. Powell talked about Dominion voting machines and made various election fraud claims that involve foreign countries such as Venezuela, Iran, and China. Is that accurate?
That's fair.
Was the meeting tense?
Oh, yeah. It was not a casual meeting.
Explain.
I mean, at times there were people shouting at each other, hurling insults at each other. It wasn't just sort of people sitting around on the couch, like, chit-chatting.
Do you recall whether he raised to Ms. Powell the fact that she and the campaign had lost all of the 60 cases that they had brought in litigation?
Yes, he raised that.
And what was the response?
I don't remember what she said. I don't think it was a good response.
Cipollone and Hirschman and whoever the other guy was showed nothing but contempt and disdain of the president.
Yeah, the three of them were really sort of forcefully attacking me verbally. Derek, and we were pushing back, and we were asking one simple question as a general matter. Where is the evidence? So,
what response did you get when you asked Ms. Powell and her colleagues, where's the evidence?
A variety of responses based on my current recollection, including, can't believe you would say something, things like this, like, what do you mean, where's the evidence? You should know, and things like that, or, a disregard, I would say, a general disregard for the importance of actually backing up, say, facts.
And, then there was discussion of, well, we don't have it now, but we will have it or whatever.
I mean, if it had been me sitting in his chair, I would have fired all of them that night and had them escorted out of the building.
Derek and I both challenged what she was saying. And she says, well, the judges are corrupt. And I was like, everyone? every single case that you've done in the country you guys lost, every one of them is corrupt, even the ones we appointed. And I'm being nice. I was much more harsh to her.
So one of the other things that's been reported that was said during this meeting was that President Trump told White House lawyers, Mr. Hirschman and Mr. Cipollone, that they weren't offering him any solutions, but Ms. Powell and others were. So why not try what Ms. Powell and others were proposing? Do you remember anything along those lines being said by President Trump?
I do. That sounds right.
I think that it got to the point where the screaming was completely out there. I mean, you got people walk in, it was late at night, it had been a long day, and what they were proposing, I thought was nuts.
I'm gonna categorically describe it as, you guys are not tough enough. Or maybe I put it another way, you're a bunch of pussies. Excuse the expression, but I'm almost certain the word was used.
Flynn screamed at me that I was a quitter and everything, kept on standing up and turning around and screaming at me. And then at a certain point I had it with him. So I yelled back. I had to come over, or sit your effing ass back down.
The president and the White House team went upstairs to the residence, but to the public part of the residence, you know, the big parlor where you can have meetings in the conference room.
Oval? They call that the yellow oval?
Yes, exactly, the yellow oval office. I always called it the upper. And I'm not exactly sure where the Sydney group went. I think maybe the Roosevelt room. And I stayed in the cabinet room, which is kind of cool. I really like that. All by myself.
At the end of the day, we landed where we started the meeting, at least from a structural standpoint, which was Sidney Powell was fighting, Mike Flynn was fighting. They were looking for avenues that would result in President Trump remaining President Trump for a second term.
I don't know what her understanding of whether she had been appointed, what she had been appointed to. Okay. In my view, she hadn't been appointed to anything and ultimately wasn't appointed to anything because there had to be other steps taken. So that was my view when I left the meeting, but she may have a different view and others may have a different view and the president may have a different view.
Were any steps taken, including the president himself, telling her she'd been appointed?
Again, I'm not going to get into what the president said in the meeting. You know, my recollection is you're not appointed till steps are taken to get the paperwork done. And when I left the meeting, okay, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not going to get into what the president said or said he wanted.
Mr. Cipollone, when the matter continued to flare up over the next several days, was it your understanding that Sidney Powell was still seeking an appointment, or that she was asserting that she had been appointed by the president at the December 18 meeting?
You know, now that you mention it, probably both. You know, in terms of I think she may have been of the view that she had been appointed and was seeking to, get that done, and that she should be appointed.
Your view, Mr. Cipollone, upon those discussions with Mr. Philbin, with Greg Jacob, what was your assessment as to what the Vice President could or could not do at the joint session?
What was my assessment about what he could or couldn't do?
Yes, your view of the issue.
My view was that the Vice President didn't have a legal authority to do anything except what he did.
They both told us, Mr. Philbin and Mr. Jacob, that they looked very closely at the Eastman memos, the Eastman theory, and thought that it had no basis, that it was not a strategy that the president should pursue. It sounds like that's consistent with your impression as well.
My impression would have been informed certainly by them with respect to the whole election fraud issue. To me, it's sort of, if you're going to make those kind of claims, and people were open to them early on because people were making all sorts of claims, and the real question is, show the evidence, okay?
We've received testimony from various people about this. One was Jason Miller, who was on the campaign, said that what was communicated to me was that Pat Cipollone thought the idea was nutty, and at one point confronted Eastman basically with the same sentiment.
I don't have any reason to contradict what he said.
You didn't go to the meeting in the Oval Office where Eastman met with the president and the vice president. Do you remember why you didn't personally attend?
I did walk to that meeting, and I did go into the Oval Office with the idea of attending that meeting, and then I ultimately did not attend that meeting.
Why not?
The reasons for that are privileged.
Okay. Were you asked to not attend the meeting, or did you make a personal decision not to attend the meeting?
Again, without getting into... I thought that the vice president did not have the authority to do what was being suggested under a proper reading of the law. I conveyed that. Okay. I think I actually told somebody that, in the vice president's, just blame me. This is, I'm not a politician. I don't, but I just said, I'm a lawyer. This is my legal opinion. But let me tell you this. Can I say a word about the vice president?
Please.
I think the vice president did the right thing. I think he did the courageous thing. I have a great deal of respect for Vice President Pence. I worked with him very closely. I think he understood my opinion. I think he understood my opinion afterwards as well. I think he did a great service to this country. And I think I suggested to somebody that he should be given the Presidential Medal of Freedom for his actions.
Here are a few of the many things you will hear next week from Mr. Cipollone.
Was that right?
I was, and others were.
Was it necessary for you to continue to push for a statement directing people to leave all the way through that period of time until it was ultimately issued after?
I felt it was my obligation to continue to push for that, and others felt it was their obligation as well.
Would it have been possible at any moment for the president to walk down to the podium in the briefing room and talk to the nation at any time between when you first gave him that advice at 2 o'clock and 4:17 when the video statement went out? Would that have been possible?
Would it have been possible?
Yes.
Yes, it would have been possible.